Welcome back to the show, everybody. It's Dina Kalmeta here. And for today's news, I first want to talk about Russia and the U.S. As many of you are aware, President Trump and President Putin will be meeting in Anchorage, Alaska on Friday, August 15th. And the most important news written by Michael Schneider is reporting that this will be one of the most important events in modern history. When they meet in Alaska on Friday, the stakes will be incredibly high. If they are able to agree to some sort of a deal, the world will rejoice. But if the meeting goes badly, there will be immense pressure on Western leaders to militarily intervene in Ukraine in order to prevent Russia from taking as much territory as it wants. At the moment, Russian forces are moving forward quite rapidly. If negotiations can stop them, Western leaders will be thrilled. But if talks fail, the conflict in Ukraine will dramatically escalate, and that will put us dangerously close to a nuclear war. On Wednesday, President Trump was asked about what will happen if the Russians do not agree to end the war. The president responded by warning that there will be very severe consequences. Asked if that meant new sanctions or tariffs, Trump demurred. He said, "I don't have to say. There will be very severe consequences." Now, of course, this was not a wise thing to say just before such an important meeting. And threatening the Russians just will not work. If Trump insists on making threats, it will backfire severely. The Russians have already said that they are willing to end the war, but they want certain things in return. Of course, what the Russians have proposed is not acceptable to the Ukrainians or to our European allies at all, and that is not likely to change anytime soon. A virtual conference that included Trump and leaders from all over Europe was held on Wednesday, as I reported, and President Trump felt that it went very well, stating that he'd rate it at a 10. Zelensky was in Berlin for the virtual conference hosted by the German Chancellor that included the leaders of Finland, France, Great Britain, Italy, Poland, the European Union, and NATO. Vice President J.D. Vance was also expected to join the portion that included Trump. So following the virtual conference, the German Chancellor made it exceedingly clear where our European allies stand, stating that we want to make sure that the right chronology happens, that there is a ceasefire, and there is an agreement that is discussed after that. A legal recognition of Russian ownership of this territory cannot happen. There has to be robust security guarantees. The sovereignty of Ukraine has to be respected. Negotiations have to be a part of a larger transatlantic strategy and has to be a part of necessary pressure on Russia. If there is no movement on the Russian side, we in the U.S. have to put more pressure on Russia. President Trump knows this position and largely agrees with it, and we had a good conversation with each other. So Merz obviously does not want a peace agreement to happen because there is no way that the Russians are going to agree to any of that. The Russians are not going to give 1 inch of territory that they have taken in the 5 provinces. In fact, the Russians want Ukraine to hand over all of the territory that the Ukrainians are still holding in 5 provinces. If Ukraine is not willing to hand over all of that territory, Russia will just simply take it. That is the Russian position. And they see no reason to compromise because they are clearly winning the war. That can be disputed. Some people believe that the Russians are winning the war, and some people believe that they are not winning it. But he goes on further to report that when asked about Trump's suggestion that there could be some swapping of territory, the Russians made it clear that this is a non-starter. The Russians also want Ukraine to be permanently banned from joining NATO. This is something that the Ukrainians and their European allies are adamantly against. Michael goes on to say, "So I have no idea why so many pundits think that a deal is possible, because the two sides are not even in the same universe when it comes to what an acceptable deal would look like." Ahead of the meeting on Friday, the White House has been trying to play down expectations. The speaker stated that this is a listening exercise for the president. This is for the president to go and to get a more firm and better understanding of how we can hopefully bring this conflict to an end. The window of opportunity for a peaceful solution is almost closed. And so let's hope that this last-ditch effort is successful. Because if it isn't successful, and we get to the very severe consequences phase, that will have massive implications for all of humanity. The meeting in Alaska on Friday really will be one of the most important events in modern history, and the fate of our society is hanging in the balance. A very interesting and succinct report here from Michael Schneider of the Most Important News. What do you guys think? You think Trump is going to be able to make a deal with Russia? I want to hear from you in the comments. If you want to see more of Michael's work, I'm going to go ahead and leave links for you guys below this video in the description. He has written several books, so go over there, go on his website, and go onto Amazon and check out his books. Excellent writer. In the meantime, let's talk about Israel. JNS.org is reporting that the Israeli foreign minister told a visiting delegation of American journalists on Wednesday that the establishment of a Palestinian state would pose an existential threat to Israel. The delegation, led by Newsmax founder and CEO Christopher Rudy, is visiting Israel as part of the foreign ministry's public diplomacy initiative. But apparently, Israel's FMs asked the question, a two-state solution? A Palestinian state in the heart of Israel would indeed be a solution for those who seek to eliminate us. We will not let this happen. He argued that creating a Palestinian state within the 1967 borders, with its capital in eastern Jerusalem, would endanger Israel's major population centers and leave the country with indefensible boundaries. He said if large countries like France and Canada want to establish a Palestinian state in their territory, they can. But here in the land of Israel, it will not happen. The foreign minister also provided the journalists with a security overview of the region, emphasizing what he described as dangers such a state would pose. Now, in the meantime, Huckabee was furious with the UK and France for their recently declared plans to unilaterally recognize a Palestinian state. He said, "You should handle disagreements with your friends through diplomatic channels with some circumspection. You don't join with and aid and abet Israel's sworn adversaries, those who are basically, I can't say certain words here in Israel, but eliminate them from the face of the earth." He also highlighted what he stressed was his personal belief that Israel's fate is determined by factors beyond geopolitical considerations, arguing that given 3,800 years of history, you can only describe this country as a country that God's hand is upon. There's no other explanation. Now, during this interview, the Times of Israel said to him, it seems that almost all of the world, and this is key, you guys, has turned against Israel, incredibly, since October 7th, with the exception of the United States. How worried are you, they asked Huckabee, as somebody who loves this country, who is the ambassador here for the very future survival of Israel? Huckabee stated, "I am not as worried about its survival because I feel like there is something bigger with Israel's survival than any geopolitical consideration. But I am worried very much that the people who claim to be a part of Western civilization do not see their connection to Israel. It should be pretty obvious to them that there is a value system upon which Israel is founded." So what the Times of Israel said is actually biblical, you guys. In the book of Zechariah, chapter 12, verse 3, God said, "In that day will I make Jerusalem a burdensome stone for all people. All that burden themselves with it shall be cut in pieces, though all the people of the earth be gathered together against it." So we are seeing this right now. And that reporter with the Times of Israel said it. The world will come against Israel as it pertains to this scripture here. But those that burden themselves with her, according to God's word, will be cut in pieces. Joel chapter 3 verse 2, God said, "I will also gather all nations and bring them down into the valley of Josaphat, and will plead with them for my people and for my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations and parted my land." So is what God is saying here is that he's going to deal with the people who part his land. So whether this be through a state of Palestine or not, Israel will be parted. So very, very prophetic words in that report, and very interesting that we are living to see it. Now, with that on the table, let's move over to China. This headline comes from Prophecy Newswatch. "Switching off America. The hidden Chinese threat in our infrastructure." It's one of the most unsettling truths of our age. The most devastating weapon China could wield against the United States may not be a missile or a drone or a hypersonic warhead. It could be a kill switch silently waiting in the technology we've already woven into the very fabric of our nation. And the worst part, we put it there ourselves. For years, warnings have trickled in from cybersecurity experts, defense analysts, and engineers. Much of the technology powering America's infrastructure, our power grids, ports, water treatment plants, even the cameras watching over our streets, comes from companies under the influence or outright control of the Chinese Communist Party. These aren't harmless business arrangements. They are strategic vulnerabilities, and they are growing. The picture is chilling. Imagine waking up one morning to find major U.S. cities without electricity, water systems offline, ports paralyzed, cell phone networks disrupted, not because of a natural disaster, but because a foreign government decided it was time to pull the plug. A single command issued half a world away could plunge millions into chaos. This is about the entire nervous system of the nation. Every crane at a port, every solar inverter in a farm field, every transformer in a substation represents a potential point of control. In modern conflict, Beijing wouldn't need to land troops or launch missiles. It could wage a war by simply severing the digital lifelines that keeps our lights on, our water running, and our food moving. The frightening part is how invisible this form of warfare would be. No explosions, no smoke, just the eerie silence of a nation gone dark while its enemies watch from half a world away. This isn't hypothetical. Evidence has already surfaced of hidden backdoors, remote access codes, and unexplained features inside Chinese-made devices. Features that can bypass normal controls, connect to remote servers, and take over operations without the owner's knowledge. Once connected to the internet, these devices can phone home to servers in China, opening pathways for surveillance, sabotage, or outright shutdown. The risks are not limited to the power grid. Chinese-made cranes at American ports, equipped with advanced sensors, can track container movements with precision. That's a logistical dream for shipping companies, but it's also an intelligence dream for anyone wanting to monitor military hardware shipments or map supply chains. The same is true for surveillance cameras, power transformers, and even industrial robots. Each one is a potential set of eyes or a hidden hand working for a foreign power. And here's the uncomfortable truth. We've let it happen because it was cheap and convenient. U.S. companies eager to cut costs and avoid delays have kept buying and installing this equipment even as concerns grow. Some have quietly replaced compromised devices when problems surfaced, but many simply carried on, unwilling to make a stink or spend more on secured domestically produced alternatives. This is where the danger deepens. If tensions over Taiwan escalate, or if an economic confrontation turns into a full-blown conflict, we may find ourselves in the most dangerous position imaginable. Think about the possibilities. A nationwide blackout could cripple hospitals, emergency services, and banking systems. Ports could grind to a halt, choking off vital imports and exports. Transportation networks could fail. In modern society, a week without power or water could cause more damage than any conventional military strike. Some will argue this is just the reality of globalization, that the interconnectedness of supply chains makes such vulnerabilities inevitable. That's the defeatist thinking. We do not have to rely on adversary-controlled technology to keep the lights on, the ports moving, and the water clean. The first step is admitting the problem. Finally, it reports this isn't about protecting against espionage or industrial theft. It's about national survival. Wars are no longer fought solely on battlefields. They are fought in server rooms, in ports, in power stations, and in the code buried deep inside the machines we rely on. The lesson of the Trojan horse still applies today, but our enemy doesn't need to sneak it past the gates. We've rolled it in ourselves, proud of the bargain price we paid. The question now is whether we have the will to roll it back out before someone decides to open it. We still have time to act, but the window is closing. The next conflict may not begin with a missile. It may begin with silence. The silence of a nation suddenly, inexplicably going dark. Another amazing article from Prophecy Newswatch. This isn't something that can happen or if. This is more of a when. if the government doesn't get their act together. This would indeed throw us back to the days before electricity, you guys. But there's still time. They can fix it. The Trump administration can do something about this. They've already admitted that our power grid is basically weakening. But to have an adversary able to push that button, not a very good situation. But what does God tell us? He tells us over 365 times in his word not to fear. He's bigger than all of this, and he is always in control. And everything that we're seeing is Bible prophecy. God said it would happen, and it's happening, and that brings us even closer to his return. But I just wanted to bring you guys an update on some of these very important headlines. I'd love to hear from all of you, so please do leave your comments below this video. When you have some time, come and visit me on my social media pages, as well as my website at www.cww7news.com. All right, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. And until next time, God bless and stay safe.